My name is Julie Dorr, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Our presentation will last approximately 40 minutes, and we'll have the remaining time available for questions that you might have of our speaker. Feel free to type your questions in at any time. Over on the right-hand side, we have a designated area just for questions. Go ahead and type them in as they occur to you during the presentation, and we'll pick them up right after our speaker has concluded. Also, if you'd like a copy of the presentation, we're going to send those to you after today's webinar. Feel free to also type your email address in the question section, and we'll send that presentation to you right after our webinar. Before we get started, please note that this webinar and all of the accompanying materials are protected by copyright and that the entire conference is being recorded. This presentation provides general information only, and if you need expert advice, I suggest that you contact someone that is an expert in their field. Let's get started today. We're going to introduce, first of all, our speaker. Many of you may know her already, Lisa Anderson with LMA Consulting Group. She is probably one of the one and only people that is specialized not only in manufacturing and distribution, but also has a keen eagle eye for production precision and a pragmatic approach to execution. She's a futurist and a big believer in building networks in person and virtually. She's also authored the book Leverage Social Networks to Drive Business Results. And today, Lisa is our presenter. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you for this wonderful presentation we're all looking forward to.
Excellent. Great. Well, welcome. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll talk today about, first of all, why focus on social networks. We're going to look at this from a largely business focus with some, career improvement aspects as well. And then why this is especially critical in today's new normal business environment. We'll look at some best practices for using social networks, look a little bit at some survey results, and talk about some case studies if we have some time. All right, so why prioritize looking at social networks? Success in business after 20-plus years of experience as both a vice president of operations and supply chain and as a business consultant, I've learned that success really boils down to your team. And that's undoubtedly true in any environment. So relationships are really equal to your bottom line business results and your career success. So that's for sure one reason to focus in on your relationships. And then leveraging your social networks is really the key strategy to develop and nurture relationships. So that's how we get to business success and back on to leveraging our social networks and social media. So one of the things that I find to be most valuable when I look across my clients is if I find something that they all have in common or something that stands out in the crowd, the best clients are successful because of these three reasons. I take note because if it's in common amongst clients across multiple industries, multiple size of businesses, it's something that I've learned that trends can become invaluable in terms of delivering business results. So what I'm seeing today across my clients is one is volatility is the new norm. And what I mean by that is several years ago, prior to the recession, for example, if the stock market went up or down by 100 points in a day, it was a major event. Everyone was either freaked out or excited and didn't know, what to do about it. Today, a 100-point swing one way or another is just a normal occurrence. We've gotten a little bit used to that volatility. And that's true in every aspect of business life. I'm seeing, customers coming and going. I'm seeing just significant volatility in almost every aspect of the manufacturers and distributors that I work with. And it's just becoming part of the normal routine. So if we can become better at dealing with volatility, we'll be more successful. And we'll talk a bit about how social media and social networks can help us achieve that. Second is that customers' expectations are high. They've probably always been high to a certain degree, but especially following the recession, customers are looking for more for less and quicker. And so I put this back into the consumer viewpoint. Most everyone that I know knew somebody or personally lost their job, took a pay cut, or was concerned about one of those types of topics happening. And so with that type of perception, suddenly where we spent our money became much more important. And so we were expecting more for our dollars than we were prior to that. So the same thing is holding true with businesses. It's not as easy as it used to be, not that it was ever easy, but it's not as easy to gain customers and to be successful. So we're really looking for increased customer service. We want, we want more for less, and we definitely want it quicker. If there's one aspect that stands out across all my clients, it's that time matters. And so that has to do with quicker deliveries, quicker closing month end quicker, so we can make better decisions. Every executive is overloaded, and most likely every manager, every employee has more things to do during the day than can be done in the day. So time is definitely of utmost importance. So if we can help our customers with that time and reduce the time, we're going to be much more valuable. So customer service is key. Prior to the recession, I worked on a few projects that related back to customer service and customer delivery performance. Since the recession, I've worked on a majority of projects that in one way or another affect customer service and customer delivery performance. So that's a trend alone even in my work environment. We're also in a new ballgame or new ballpark, however you want to look at this, for sales growth. And what I mean by that is we're just starting to get where the baby boomers are beginning to retire. And why that's important is because 70% of our gross domestic product is based on consumption. And so consumption is going to be based upon how much consumers feel like they can spend. As folks think about retirement and start to retire, they start to spend less money. It's been proven statistically over time. With that said, of course, we might spend more money on certain things like luxury goods and vacations, those kinds of things. But overall, we aren't spending the kind of money we used to. We hope not to be spending too much money on diapers. We hope not to have too many kids living with us, those kinds of things. So it's definitely a new ballgame in terms of sales growth. So it's no longer as easy, not that it was ever quite this easy, but it's no longer as easy as picking up the phone and receiving customer orders. We need to be doing something different to grow our sales, which is affecting all manufacturers and distributors today. Depending upon the industry, it's we're in a better or worse time frame right now, but equally across the board, we have to be standing out in the crowd in order to gain sales revenue. And there's definitely some programs that we can use with our social networks and social media to make that happen. Another thing is cash is king. So during the recession, no one had money. So of course it was king. Since the recession, the mid-sized and large-sized companies have money, and even many small companies have money. But whether they'll spend it is another story. So since there's all this volatility, it's worrisome. They're less likely to spend money. So there's a perception that cash is still king, regardless of whether or not we have it if we're not spending it, especially when you look back at consumption. So that's definitely affecting our current situation. Next is there's an information overloaded society. Talk about great application for social media and social networks. With the advent of e-commerce, think about the Amazon effect. I can't, walk across the street without hearing something or seeing something in the news about Amazon. They're now going to be delivering on Sundays, and they have distribution centers within a couple of miles of everybody's of the major cities in the U.S. So there's significant thought about how do we purchase 24/7, and how does a manufacturer support customers who want to buy 24/7, and how do we make that happen in our facilities, because it's a quite different ballgame than it was in the past. And also big data. What that means is, in essence, we get data from everywhere. I mean, before we come in the morning, most of us have hundreds of emails. And that's insane, and that's just one piece of information. There's also news. There's news coming to us on our phones. There's scores coming to us on our phones, and you know, we're just overloaded. And social media is another one of those aspects. We have all sorts of data coming from everywhere. So the question for businesses is, how do we use that data in something that can help us make better decisions quicker and more effectively? So big data is a way of synthesizing through all that noise, shall we say. And then last but not least, the last trend I'm seeing is that there's increasingly complex needs, certainly for manufacturers and distributors. The supply chain has become extended. There is a movement for reshoring, but even so, the supply chain is complicated. There's most, if not all, clients of mine would have a really hard time figuring out where everything is sourced from. And I don't mean just what they purchase, but what goes into what they purchased and all the way back to the supply chain, or even the other way around. Where does everything go that they send off, and you know, what happens to it, and how many more different companies are involved? So it's a really complicated supply chain today, and it's definitely global. So that, of course, brings its own, you know, set of risks. There's certainly political risk, but there's a lot more regulations in today's environment, and there's differences among different countries, of course. There's just risk of natural disasters. I mean, we certainly have seen that happening quite frequently, and that's another great potential use for social media and other avenues. And sustainability is certainly becoming a hot topic. So when we look at all of these latest trends, how do we sum up the new normal? We really look at it as, I used to say that baselines must be an assumption, and that's cash is king, service is paramount, and execution is everything. And that's where I stopped. But really, that's no longer enough. And so although those are just, they should be done every day, most, you know, very few people are doing those exceptionally well every day, but they should be. But beyond that, we have to start to innovate. Doesn't mean we have to be, you know, the world's leading creative folks ourselves. We have to think about new ways to innovate, and that just means instead of solving problems like bringing performance back to somewhere where we used to be, we need to bring performance to a whole different level. And we can do that in many ways that doesn't require the typical like 3M inventing of sticky notes. So we need to think more about innovation, collaboration, what a definite great use of social media. And then, of course, in today's environment, image will make or break you. There's a lot, you know, I could talk for an entire presentation on that topic, but image is very important, and social media and social networks can have a big impact on that. What you said 10 years ago when you're looking for the next job or you're looking to hire your next employee could easily come back to help you or haunt you. All right, so how do we succeed in this new normal? Oops, how do we succeed in the new normal is, one, we need to find and implement ways to provide exceptional service at a high value and return for our customer, but at higher margins as well for us. So typically these are seen as possibly something you wouldn't do all at the same time, but that's what's needed to be successful in the new normal. So we really need to create a talent advantage, which takes us back to our social networks. So really, one of the ways we can do that is we can leverage our number one asset. Our number one asset is not what machines we have, and is not even, you know, what suppliers we have, but it's really our social network. And I'll define that in a minute or two. But in essence, you know, the people that we're working with throughout our supply chain are the key to how we can succeed. And so this chart I use here sometimes is used for looking at a system, but this is really true for our social networks. Is I doubt seriously that any of us on the call, including me, leverage our social networks beyond, you know, 20% just because it's so challenging to do. So the question here is, how can we better utilize more of the connections and the people and the relationships we have for a win-win-win objective. Certainly we're not looking for win-lose ideas here, but how do we achieve a win-win with our social network? So Webster's definition of a social network is a network of friends, colleagues, and other personal contacts. That's, pretty expansive. That's why I said we couldn't possibly be using 80% of our network. We have vast opportunity. And another one that is more geared to social media will be an online community of people with a common interest, use a website or other technologies to communicate with each other and share information, resources, etc. So there are countless opportunities for us to use both of these definitions to our advantage with social networks. So one of the things to look at, and then we'll go into some more details, is how can we leverage the talent that there exists in our supply chain network? First of all, I think it behooves us to take a step back and look at who's even in our network, because I bet there's somebody on this call that's thinking, I wonder if, I don't know if I really have a social network that I can use. Because believe me, I've been there too. And then you start to think about it. We certainly have some of these people that we are in touch with. We have our internal team. So in our business environment, there's got to be people that we're talking to that work with us. If we're in planning, we probably are talking to operations or purchasing or customers, customer service. So there's the internal team and networks within our environment. In our networks, we're going to go into more detail here, but think of all the people you know outside of work, but that could be interested in the products and and other, like let's say the same IT system. There's networks of people that could be related to the people we work with. So just the internal team and networks could take us, days to think of all the people that we might know. Then we go to our suppliers, and if you're not in purchasing, you maybe think, well, I don't know if I know that many suppliers, but we certainly can get to know them. And so there's our suppliers, there's our customers, there's our suppliers' suppliers, and our customers' customers, and that can go on and on. And there's distribution partners. So there's transportation carriers. There is, import, export. There's, all sorts of people in that network. And there's also, when you consider this overall equation, there's trusted advisors. So there's going to be CPAs that your firm might work with, attorneys, commercial insurance folks. So there's countless people in our network that we have opportunity to think about. It's actually a bit overwhelming to think about all the people that exist. So I thought one of the things to think about is sometimes we think of social media and social networks as a technical topic. However, according to a study of more than 60 companies across multiple industries, which was written up in Harvard Business Review, and it was related to social networks, companies that found significant returns, which is what we're talking about today, is we want to drive business results, devise social strategies that help people create or enhance relationships. So it's not all about, certainly you need to know the technology and the aspect of how you link with somebody or something like that. But really, the key to success is those relationships. So we all can do something about that and take a couple of steps forward each day. So the idea here from best practice is to find people, create engagement by finding partners, and to collaborate with, and develop win-win partnerships, which really is going to increase our profit. When we think about connecting with, I think a lot of us think about connecting with companies. I used to think this way too, and sometimes I still do. Like, wouldn't it be great if, my customer is Boeing, or my customer is, or my supplier is, I don't know, GE. So we're thinking of connecting with those companies, but it's really not the company that we're connecting with. It's the people in the company that we're connecting with. And that's very true throughout the social networks. There's no way to connect, quote, with GE. You've got to connect with the right person at GE. And ideally, you know somebody in your network who knows somebody who knows somebody who works with GE. So it's connecting with people that matter, not companies. And I find this to be very true in my career as well. My buyers, let's say the people who bring me into a company to help them improve their performance, I'm not working with that company, although of course I get the check from the company, but it's the buyer, the person that brings me in that I'm really working with. Because if they go to a different company, I'm more likely to follow the person than I am the company. So the people are the key. So when you're looking at relationships, a few quick tips to think about is, one is, when you're trying to think about creating a conversation on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook even, we want to have conversations. We don't want to just throw stuff out there into the universe with 80 billion other tidbits of things that no one pays attention to because they can't deal with it because they're information overloaded. So we want to have more of a conversation. So we want to create personal engagement with another person is what we're really saying here. So think more about when you're starting to use your social networks. One thing you can walk away with today is to make it more conversational. And think of that person as a person. Maybe you're looking for an answer, but you're also talking to a person. Keep it with variety. And what I mean by that is we tend to get bored. I mean, after all, there's so many stimulus out there that, like I said, there's 8 million things coming to you every day that we're just overloaded. And so if someone just continues to talk, or you know, maybe they're sending you emails and that's their only mode of communication, it's not, you know, we just start ignoring it after a while, even if they're interesting. So we need variety. And it's been shown that that's going to be a much more successful way to go about things. So another thing you can really walk away today is don't always send an email because you know, it's not the best avenue to success. Sometimes email is good, and there are different ways, different times when you use different mediums, but there's email, there's picking up the phone, there's the lost art of in-person. You know, walking down the hallway to talk to somebody can achieve much more than any email or even picking up the phone can in many cases. Then there's, you know, meetings, and you could link with that person. There's a lot of ways to communicate. There's videos, you know, visual. So there's countless ideas there. So think about variety, adding variety to your communications. Of course, be open and listen. So many times, don't just talk, but ask questions and listen, because that can build your relationships much quicker than any other avenue. And then be an object of interest. And what I mean by that is try to think about how you phrase things and what you're asking and the questions you're asking, so that people are more interested in what you're saying than the 8,000 other messages they could have to deal with today. So, you know, we didn't have to used to worry about this, but really, if we want to be successful in today's environment, we have to become more of an object of interest and phrase what we're going to say and or use variety or be compelling in our conversations. So I'm going to talk quickly through this, and we're going to go through each one of them. So overall, what we want to do when we look at using our social networks is to start with the objective, and then we stick to our strategies and know our tools, which we'll go through, which that definitely includes social media, leverage, and then simplify. Because one of the things in today's environment is simplification is key. So we want to remember, we want to leverage our social networks to develop and nurture relationships with key people. So we got to make sure we're talking to the right people. After all, there may be 8,000 choices, but which ones are the right ones? Because we certainly don't have time to talk to 8,000 people. To achieve our business objectives. So what are our business objectives? You know, our next personal ones, or what is like our department's objectives or our company objectives. So, and that kind of syncs up with how we can provide exceptional service and high value return for our customer at higher margins. So I'm going to go through these kind of rapidly, but when you look at, when you're in manufacturing and distribution, some of the ways you can provide exceptional service is to have effective inventory management systems so that you have the right thing in the right place at the right time, which is somewhat of an expectation today because, like I said, the right time could be a lot quicker than it used to be. And we can use some of the collaborative programs in social media to make that happen. We want to collaborate with customers and suppliers, partnerships. Some of this can really just be as simple as picking up the phone. But we also can start groups on LinkedIn, as an example, for key topics that relate to collaborating with customers and suppliers, and then just invite those customers and suppliers in, make them feel valued. So that's, you know, that's a thought. You can do the same thing on, Facebook as an example. Typically for businesses, LinkedIn is more of the tool of choice. And same thing from a Twitter perspective. It's typically used more for promotion, but it also can be used to tweet information that has to do with how we can, that you want to get out to your customers and suppliers. Rigorous focus on lead times. Like I said, time matters. And excellence in execution. So there's all sorts of ways that we'll go into that. That could be a day's seminar on all the different ways we could do that and how we can use social media to achieve it. For high value and return for our customers. So we're sort of thinking about the lean philosophy here. Are we focused on what your customer values? Well, how do we know what our customer values? That really is going to go back to understanding our customers, which could go back to asking them, could go back to doing some research on social media to see what they seem to be interested in, and then maybe getting in touch with them via one of the typical networks like Google+. So there's a lot of ways we can go about that, to think about what our customers value, and it goes right back to our objective. Again, collaborative customer and supplier partnerships and programs. Undoubtedly, I've worked with clients that have achieved reduced inventory and increased margins by doing these types of programs, and there are many ways to vary communication through social networks by using, with this approach. And are you focused on execution alone or execution and innovation? So one of the best ways, right, to have ideas is to brainstorm, because none of us can do it alone. How can we brainstorm? Well, there's a lot of ways. We can start a group to ask questions, to think about topics, and it's a great way to approach R&D as an example. But, it can be done in a simpler way for any of our positions within a company to gain ideas for innovation. We can just do this internal to our company as well and start there, because we can do that with an intranet. That's a social network as well. And of course, we want to prioritize projects. And then we want to achieve higher margins and cash flow. So how do we identify our higher value customers? How do we know which products are profitable? That's many times the key to success. And that goes back to the big data idea I was talking about earlier. But a lot of that data can come from our social networks. I mean, after all, some of it's going to come from our ERP systems and can be put together in a business intelligence type of way, and some of it can be what are our customers buying? What are their customers buying? We can do a lot of research on social networks to find out these types of answers, which can really help go to improving our performance. I have a client who works in aerospace, and they find out a lot through social networks as to which planes are being built and what's happening with those planes, and that helps us to better our forecast, which then allows us to provide better service at reduced inventory levels. So a lot of those, which activities add value, there's a lot to look at there. So now getting into strategies. One strategy that you might be able to walk away with today is to think about how to use the right combination of high tech and high touch, because really in today's environment we are sort of getting overwhelmed with the high tech, but how do we add high touch to that? And that's the personal side of things, and that's one of the keys to how to use social networks successfully, is to build those ongoing conversations and relationships in your LinkedIn presence, in your Facebook presence, and those types of things. So we want to build a relationship network that focuses on community, and so that means we're going to have to provide value. I mean, what community wants just somebody who's always looking for something, what they can get out of it? So how can we build a community with the people we're talking to on our social networks? That would mean that the numbers of people on our social networks are not nearly as important as the quality of the relationships we're building. And then, of course, providing value. So like I said, we want exponential value to come from what we're spending our time to do. So when we look at the relationships and think about this in terms of just LinkedIn connections, because we really should be looking to connect, and Google Plus and Facebook and Twitter, is what other employees can we be looking to connect with? Which people in our supply chain might we connect with? What social relationships might we connect with? Because like I said, it is surprising how often I find that people on the other coast know somebody that knows somebody that I know that has to do with a client project or a a business results or something. It's really interesting because you would think that with all the people in the world, it's just surprising how many we really connect to. And then our civic relationships. Think about industry groups. This is a great use for social media. Is like, for example, in manufacturing distribution, there's the APICS Association, the leading association for supply chain and operations management folks. You should be connecting with those groups so that you can start to form community and talk about topics that are key to us. There's also the AME, the American Manufacturing, I don't remember the last word, but AME. There's, if you're in purchasing related, there's the ISM, there's CSCMP. I could go on, but there's lots of groups that we could be connecting with where they have interests in topics similar to us. Geography-related groups. I found this to be really interesting recently because I happen to live in Southern California, so I have industry groups that span, the world actually. But there's geography-related groups that are going to be specific to where I live, which in some cases, if I need to get it together in person with someone, that's going to be a good thing to know. So geography-related groups. There's functional groups, and this might be, let's say you have an ERP system and you don't know how to utilize certain functionality. There could be functional or special interest groups that would relate to that particular software. And there's also could be another functional group that's more traditional, would be like well, let's just say supply chain managers. There's groups for supply chain managers that aren't a trade or professional association, just groups of folks who are interested in supply chain management. And there's other groups that are focused in finance and accounting. So there's countless groups and that we could be associated with. Another one that can be very valuable when it comes to driving business results is like the special interest groups of like universities. So your alumni. Think about this. People are interested in helping people that they know and they like and they trust. So people that you used to go to school with that you have something in common with, you may not have thought about it in quite a long time, could easily be related to what you need to do to have success in your career or for your business. And so starting to learn more about them and how you can help them can be easily turned into a win-win relationship. So there's the first step would be just even finding all those people on the social networks could be quite time-consuming. And then actually, as you start it, of course, remember you want to start creating an ongoing conversation with them via the social networks, which that alone could take up quite a bit of time. Could be a year from now that we get, depends on how many people you have in your network, could be quite some time. And then we want to, how do we leverage these social networks once we get them put together? So there's the word of mouth. Like I said, actually that never goes out of style. One of the best ways to stand out in the crowd today is actually just to do something in person. So how about combining in person with the social networks? Because there's nothing better to find people than on social networks. And there are people who don't answer phones because they, just do everything via the computer these days. So we have to think about using, like, again, a variety of styles. There's company meetings, newsletters. There's company newsletters many times. So how can maybe we can get cited in the company newsletter. That could go quite a bit away, can go pretty far in terms of helping with a particular project that can help to drive business results. Because some of this just has to do with how interested are people in helping you with the roadblocks that you're going to come across. There's press releases, intranet, websites, blogs. Blogs are really popular today. There's a lot of blogs out there. And the reason there's so many blogs is because people read blogs. Because if you want to find information on how to even, like, let's say, use equipment in a smarter way, how do you reduce waste levels from an operational perspective, or supply chain related, how do we find certain suppliers or how do we implement the latest trends in supply chain or supply chain planning? Blogs are a great way to find that answer. So there's many, many uses here of social network and social media. There's forums, and there's like IT softwares, ERP softwares have a lot of forums many times. And some of the trade associations do as well. So one of the reasons why you should think about using social media is just look at these numbers. They're outrageous. I mean, we don't need 500 million different connections in order to be successful. We probably need a handful. So there's countless options, but obviously this is growing. I mean, I did a presentation similar to this a couple of years ago, and these numbers have grown exponentially since then. So these numbers are just powerful. There's, you know, if you aren't on social media, don't sign up for everything at once, but I'd recommend that you start with one or two and get going, because it's going to be important to your company and to your personal career success to think about utilizing social media, but utilizing it in a way that's smart, so you just don't, you know, dump all your time and get nothing accomplished. So community building of the supply chain network. There's a lot of ways we can do that. Like I said, this is one of the things we can do to have customer and supplier programs, those kinds of things. We can develop virtual teams, create a customer service experience. Certainly listening for customer feedback and tracking performance is something that some of the best companies who leverage social media do really well. There's a lot of examples like Nike. You know, they're listening to see what are their customers saying. And interestingly, the best companies, you know, would encourage negative feedback, because we're going to have problems as consumers, or even as businesses. But if we don't say anything about those problems and we just want to not, you know, ignore them when people complain, how are we going to improve our experience? So we got to look at customer feedback, and that's a great use of social media. Just, you know, there's all sorts of things here. Let's see if there's any others that are. It can be a route to project staffing using social media if you're typically for the larger companies. Equipment suppliers, there's a lot of ways you can get information from folks who are, you know, several levels down and global in your supply chain, which is a little more difficult on a phone call. But you can do it electronically, and it's through email, through groups. That's actually a great use of groups on LinkedIn, let's say, or Facebook, is to ask questions that are technical questions, or how do you utilize equipment, how to utilize software, ideas for the latest trends, those kinds of things. Leverage process experts. So who knows how to implement Lean better than anyone else? Well, we can find that. We look on social media and see what's most popular, as an example. What are the best companies doing? We can see, you know, who are they following? We can do those types of things. We can share issues and opportunities with technical experts, connect with employees. I mean, this seems like a small thing, but it's really huge. We can keep folks in the loop with trade show information via social media. Actually, recently at the APEX conference, there's, you know, everybody has apps now, and we can tweet about what's happening. We can get instant information as to what's trending in, you know, in the direction we're looking for, what's popular, what's not popular. We can create excitement. Remember what I said about being an object of interest? There's a lot of things to think about there. And there's knowledge and education as a different category. So product training, another great use. Think about YouTube. What could be better? I mean, I've had this problem. I am not the greatest person at setting up technical things like, I don't know, you know, electronics and making everything work together. It's entirely complicated, and I'm not crazy about the directions that they've sent. But I can look at a video on YouTube, and suddenly I'm much happier with this company, because I can understand. I can see what they're doing and repeat it. So think about putting product training videos out there. Company news, people want to hear that in all sorts of different fashions. How do we source global sourcing? Great use of social media and social networks is to find options. That doesn't mean necessarily that we don't vet them, but we can also vet them in many ways, including some traditional and social media ways. Best practices at your fingertips. What could be better than you're the one who comes up with the best practice that helps your company move to the next level? Well, you can find that out by understanding what companies in your industry do. You can look on LinkedIn for companies that are in your industry, and then which ones are the better ones. See what they're saying, what ideas they have for innovation, and you can suggest You can answer questions because, of course, you want to provide value, not just look for value, and be successful. There's also knowledge you can gain from social media. So there's surveys. We recently just did a survey. I did it in combination with the Apex group in the area, and we did a survey on the skill gap in today's environment because there's definitely a skill gap for manufacturers and distributors. And that's a great way to gain knowledge on what a wide spectrum of people and executives and leaders in manufacturing and distribution think. And we can use that information rather rapidly in today's environment. We can do polls. There's LinkedIn polls. There's events. There's stories. Stories is a great way to be of interest to folks. So think about doing stories. And you don't want to type a long story, but you can put a tidbit out there of a success story, and people will say, well, how'd you do that? I'm interested in learning. And then, of course, talent management. That's fundamental. Is in today's environment, executive recruiters use LinkedIn the preponderance of the time. So talk about talent management. But you want to retain your top talent? Well, you better be making sure you're treating your employees well and seeing what's happening out there. What's your competition doing? Finding new talent. How are we answering questions? We want to find the right person for the job. It's very costly to have the wrong people in the wrong jobs. There's all sorts of things you can do with talent management on the web. And then there's also business development. Of course, this is the more traditional, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it because manufacturers and distributors, of course, the more we can promote our products, it's probably the key thing we do on social media and create an interest in our products, the better off we are. But there's so many other uses than just that. So that's why I'm focusing most of the time on the other ones. And then there's R&D. I talked a bit about this earlier. What's better than to collaborate with our customers, our suppliers, our equipment suppliers, put it all together with our internal folks on a social network platform and come up with something that's even better. Why go through 10 rounds of testing when we can just get the answers up front and go through one round of testing? And then remember to simplify, because if there's so many things out there, you can't afford to dump all your time and not get anything out of it. So be really clear on what your objective is. Like, don't worry about going on every social network today. But let's just say that the biggest thing in your work life today is that you need to find a source for a key material because you need a backup supplier. Then start off by you have to start with creating a network of folks, otherwise you have nothing to work with. But create a network of folks, at least start with 100 people or something. And if you don't have 100, don't worry about it. Start with what you have. Join a few groups. Sooner versus later, you're going to have a lot more. You'll have 100 with no trouble. And then target your thinking on how you can do that one thing. Find a source for your material, if that's your objective. If you're looking at doing vendor-managed inventory with a key customer because you're going to manage their inventory for them, how can you utilize social networks to achieve that? So think about just one or two things that really matter to your success, your company's success, and start to think about how you could use your social networks like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube to make those happen. And which approach will have the best impact and the largest impact? Because there are many ways to go about things. So it's worth taking, 10 minutes, an hour, even a day. It'd be worth it to take the time to think about what you're planning to do and why, and what's your most expeditious or your quickest, most effective path to achieving that, utilizing social networks, and then do it. So it seems like you want to just get up and run out and go. Don't worry about it. Just go. I want to get started. But you can easily waste so much time. Let me tell you, everyone on this call, including me, has probably done that. We wasted lots of time doing things we turns out wasn't the best approach. So it's really worth it to take the time and take a step back and simplify. And then don't forget high tech, high touch. We want a combination of using technology And high touch doesn't have to mean that you get in touch in person, but you need to think about having it as a conversation. So brings us right to what's important in social networking. It's all about relationships. You want to be referable. Think about it that way. Whether it doesn't have to relate to finding another job, although it does, but it really has to do with how do you find that supplier? How are you more successful in gaining a customer forecast? How do you work more successfully with your internal counterparts who may or may not be on the same page with you? Well, you have to be referable, and what I mean by that is be quality. You know, something that someone is interested in saying, oh yeah, you know what? You got to know Lisa because she could really help you with this challenge you're talking about. If somebody on your social network understands that you're interested in providing value and that you're that type of person, they're going to think about referring you to the right person. And one referral to the right person with the right answer for your business problem is going to be better than 8,000 messages that you can spend months sending out into the oblivion, because we've all tried it and it doesn't work. So it's all about relationships. Of course, that leads back to personal traits and your philosophy. It has to be value-based and collaborative. How do you set priorities? And think more about outcomes versus input. So instead of all the tasks you have to do today, think about what do I really need to get done in terms of what would I like the results to be. It's a new way of thinking. And then I have a couple of case studies, but I think I'll see how many questions we have, and then if we have time, I can always come back and talk to some case studies. So Julie, do we have any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Lisa, and it certainly was helpful to go through this, and yes, we do have some questions. So I'd like to just explain again how our listeners today can submit a question for Lisa to answer, and then, as Lisa suggested, if we have time, we'll come back and cover some of these case studies. So let's just go through how you can actually submit a question. Over on the right-hand side, there's a panel, interactive user panel, and there's a section that says questions. There's an open area in the bottom. Just type your question in there, hit send, and I'll be able to read that aloud for Lisa to answer. So at this point in time, Lisa, we do have some questions. I'm going to merge some of them together just to make it a little easier for us to answer some of them because they're similar in context. First of all, we have a number of people who are newbies. In other words, they have never really done anything with social networks. Their company is doing things with social media, but they have yet to jump into the fray, if you will. Are there specific, maybe it's easier to use, or maybe where you get the more bang for your buck, as you had mentioned in your presentation, social network you would recommend, and then there's a strategy that they should use when they first enter that social media to maybe get acclimated and build kind of a following?
Yeah, absolutely. Undoubtedly, assuming that you're working with a manufacturer, distributor, or business, the best one to start with is going to be LinkedIn, because that's where the majority of the business people hang out. I mean, Facebook is certainly the largest social network, but it's going to be more social in nature. There is some business, but LinkedIn is going to be the best place to start. So one is to start with LinkedIn. It's easy to get going with LinkedIn because, in essence, you just have to sign up, and you don't even have to fill out your ID. But one of the things I do is I would at least, sign up for LinkedIn, fill out your title, and, at least the company you work with, and maybe just a brief description. You don't have to get everything perfect to start with, but a little bit of something about yourself, because if you think about it, if you're going to start interacting with groups and people look at you, they need to know something about you. So don't worry about it being perfect, and don't worry about any of that. Just start with simple, simple. So, sign up. Ideally put a photo out there. That's one of the things that actually is helpful, because otherwise people just think about it in your own life. Don't you feel more comfortable when you actually can see the other person? So put a photo out there. If you don't have a perfect photo, goodness grief, don't worry about it. Just put out a photo that's, you can always improve it. And then set up some key information. And then the key thing there would be just think about 20 contacts. 10 or 20 contacts, because I know that some folks, they might think, wow, I really don't know if I have that many contacts. Think about the people you work with every day. Start with them, because most everybody has a LinkedIn profile, or you can even send them one to create one. So start with them. Start with people you've worked with in the past, or if you're new, like you're in school, great way to start is with people you used to go to school with. So who are, let's say you're a business major and you just graduated, or you're getting ready to graduate, set up a profile and start to connect with those folks. And if you are in any trade associations, or maybe you should pick one, whether you're in it or not, pick a group that's related to either the career you want or the career you have, and find a couple of folks in there, and that's going to get you started. You'll have your 10 or 20, and then you'll be able to expand from there as you find the, like I said, start with one group that would be appropriate to you, and that'll help you expand right there. And then sooner or later, before you know it, people are going to start sending you requests, and you'll be off to the races.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Tim has a question too. He's on LinkedIn, but he just kind of reads things, and occasionally he'll see almost there's hashtags and codes. People seem to be writing in code, if you will. And I think he's fearful of not being on the insider's knowledge base of knowing what all those codes are. So is there a place where he can go and try to learn a little bit more about more of the technical aspects of participating in social media?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually many books out there today on the technical aspects of how to use the different social media networks. Of course, they become obsolete almost as soon as they're written. But actually, one of the better ways to go, I did read a couple of books when I was getting started, but I think one of the better ways to go is just do a search for top LinkedIn tips, since I recommended we start with LinkedIn. And you're going to find you're going to probably find a lot of blogs with just a couple of tips, and that will get you going. But one thing I would say is that the hashtags and all that, Twitter is going to be a little more confusing with the protocols used. For LinkedIn, it's pretty simple. It really is. You might see some of that because people are looking at Twitter, but for the most part, you just have to link with people, and then I wouldn't worry about providing status updates about what you're doing until you get comfortable. So one of the best things to do that's really easy to do is just search for groups on LinkedIn and search for groups that are related to an area you're interested in. Like I said, maybe your function or maybe the software you use, depends on what, whatever would be most interesting to you right now. Find a group and then request to join the group. And then read conversations for like just a week. Read what's happening in that group. And then it might be a good idea to, if you know the answers, to start answer a question or two. And that will be a good way to get started where you don't have to worry about protocols, because you can watch and learn on the fly and then start asking questions and answering. But if you really want to learn, in a quick way, I'd go to the internet, search for, 10 tips, those kinds of things, because that way you'll have, just a couple of key tips and you won't get overwhelmed with too much data.
Okay, good. And John brings up a good question, and for some of us who are older and are used to walking down the hall and talking to our coworkers, he is talking about this, incredible range that social media creates. It's almost, when you think about it, mind-boggling. And he's wondering, how do we take social media and integrate it with the more traditional face-to-face, and really kind of make sure we're still connecting, not on a real superficial level maybe, but making sure we have a meaningful connection.
Yeah, that really goes to the high-tech, high-touch comments. I would, actually one way to do is, there really is nothing better than face-to-face, typically speaking. So I'd start there. I mean, one way to stand out in the crowd today is actually to walk down the hall and talk to somebody, or pick up the phone and talk to somebody. So what I would add to that, though, is once you've walked down the hall or picked up the phone, then I would follow up to that conversation with sending a LinkedIn invitation. That's the key. And then you can start to interact with them on LinkedIn. When you send the LinkedIn invitation, one tip to take away is don't just send the standard message, which is, I have to say, 95% of the people send me just, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I'm thinking, who the heck is this person? I may have met them somewhere a week ago, but I don't remember. So one of the things that would be really helpful is to say a quick sentence. Oh, it was great to talk to you earlier today. Wanted to connect with you on LinkedIn as well, or something. Or it's nice to see you at XYZ conference. So put a tiny intro and follow up with a LinkedIn invitation, and that'll be a great simplistic way to get started. And then you'll have them in your network. I have to tell you, it's a lot easier to keep track of people on social networks than it is on even emails, because people leave jobs, they move around, and they don't keep emails, but they do keep their profiles updated.
Good point. Good point. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. And on behalf of Lisa Anderson of LMA Consulting Group, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. I'm sorry we didn't have time to handle the actual case studies, but hopefully what we can do is put those in a blog or something and let Lisa talk about those further online and actually use today what we preached in the webinar, right, Lisa?
Absolutely.
And just real quickly, I want to just also mention that Lisa is going to be doing another webinar in January, specifically on January 15th. The topic for that webinar will be sales and operational planning. I'll be sure to send you a registration link and a follow-up email so that you can be included in that webinar as well. I've also got Lisa's contact information on the screen right now. She is also the author, as we've mentioned, of the book with the same title as the webinar, and that is Leverage Social Networks to Drive Business Results. You can find that on her website, so she was not obviously doing a shameless plug, but I'm going to for her since someone asked about where they can learn more, obviously through her book. And at this point in time, there's a way where you can actually download the 8 don'ts. Sometimes it's good to know the do's, but Lisa also sharing with you the don'ts. Again, thank you all for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time, and we look forward to providing you more useful information in the future. Have a great day.